Today we have Bonnie Culver, Dr. Bonnie Culver, who is the director of the Wilkes Creative Writing Program, which is a low residency MFA program, as most of you know. She's also a former president of the Associated Writers Program. And so welcome, Bonnie.
Hello.
We're going to be talking to you. Bonnie's a playwright, and we're going to be talking to you about uh, the AWP first, and then programs in general, and then about the Wilkes program. So tell me, the AWP. What would a student need to know about that?
Okay. First of all, it's Association of Writers and Writing Programs, and I was a chairperson of the Board of Trustees. And what that means is that, like with any nonprofit, you have two kinds of boards. You have an advisory board, which might help the executive director make some decisions, but they really have no fiduciary power or a big say in what happens. But the fiduciary board, a working board, is different. And that happened in 2015. AWP moved to a fiduciary model. And so what that meant is the kinds of expectation of the board, we're expected to give more of our time, to give more of our expertise. We're much more engaged in the day-to-day operations or the planning, the strategic planning of what AWP should be. So why am I telling you this? So the last 5 years, they've built into, and I think this is important to know for faculty and students, this past board, which was my last board meeting, we added for the first time some major players from the industry. Before that time, the board was mostly faculty members and program directors. So it was all about colleges and programs. But AWP has made a very clear move into doing more with agents and editors and publishers. So if you go to a conference now, you see different events that we never had before, and it's because of that change. So for example, Folio Management, who is Jeff Kleinman, is one of the co-founders. He's now on the board of trustees of AWP. His agency modeled, and other agencies came this time, to offer workshops and meetings with agents. AWP had never crossed that line into the actual professional part of writing, and now they have made that jump. So not only can you go to the major conference each year where there's 12 to 15,000 writers, and you'll see 900 exhibitors and 2,000 presentations and readings, but you also have these work sessions now that involve professionals. And I think that's important for students to know, because it's no longer just about the academic programs, it's about the world of writing. And that's one thing I've heard. The other thing I've done with AWP has been acting as a program reviewer. When AWP provides that service for programs that need a program assessment or need a program review, which many schools require. And I've been a reviewer on 5 or 6 different programs, both the undergraduate and graduate. And the one thing we heard from students at each of those reviews is they want more practical, hands-on knowledge, information, access to publishers, agents, editors, movie producers, that they want more of that built in. So it's not just theory, it's practical for them, that they can leave with some skills that they feel they're in a better position to actually find a place in the writing industry that might not be as a writer. It might be as a writer-editor. It might be as a writer-agent. And with that access now, they have an ability to at least have contacts in those worlds. So, so that's a major shift for AWP's philosophy. And I think it's an important one for students. And if your program is a member program, then as students, you automatically get the Writer's Chronicle, which is a craft-based piece. But now you'll have access to these other webcasts. They're moving into webinars, podcasts, and they'll be using some of these board members to help make that happen.
And the job list too. As a matter of fact, talking
And
about
job is
industry,
correct.
so and you can sort through the job list according to location, according to type of job. It's not just academic jobs.
That's correct.
All sorts of things. So you've done, Bonnie, you've done program assessments. You've gone into other programs and looked at them. What should students, having seen these programs, what should students be looking for when they take on the daunting task of thinking about which MFA program or which MA in writing program? What should they especially seek out?
Yeah, first of all, you have to decide, and this depends upon your living situation. You have to decide if a residency program is better for you, than a low residency program. And the new addition that may be coming down the pike, there are a handful now of no residency programs. Most of them running right now aren't very strong. Um, but that with all of that's happened with COVID-19, the low res programs have to look at that. That's got to be a possibility. But first of all, you have to decide if you can move somewhere and go to a college and be part of a residency program, you have a better chance of finding some kind of funding, but you'll be doing work on campus and you must be in residence. If you're in the situation, as most of our students are, where you have a job and you have a family and you can't you can't move to Ohio and go to the Neo MFA. You can't, or Binghamton University, but talking about a residency program, you can't disrupt your life for 5 years. It's just impossible. Then low residency programs have offered a good alternative. They run usually less expensive than a residency program because they don't have the bricks and mortar piece. But for working adults, and the advantage for those is not just that, but you're also kind of living the way a writer works. If you're lucky, you get to meet with an editor, producer, agent, a couple times a year. And then the rest of the time you're working on your own. You're working 20, 30 hours a week on your writing while you might be working another job. And that's pretty much how most writers in the United States work. So I think it emulates that. So that's the first decision. The second thing, and of course I'm biased because I think the Wilkes program does this really well, is from the very beginning we've involved agents and editors and publishers in the design of the program. So some of our curriculum then is not just craft, as all programs offer, but offers that business correspondence, that a required internship where they actually have to do something in publishing, write a review, launch a book, proof a book. We offer internships in arts education. They're actually teaching or adjuncting, but they're meeting with each other online to talk about problems they face in teaching, to share different methods, really preparing them for that world. In the craft piece, we require a full manuscript, not a partial manuscript, as some programs do. And you need to decide if that's what works for you. But it's a big difference in finishing a full novel than having a partial novel with an outline. But that may be as much introduction to the writing world that you want. You have to decide that. But we also have agents and editors who then read those manuscripts and meet with students. And again, what we're trying to do is put them through the actual process they'd follow if they were bringing a new work to life. So in playwriting, for example, we use equity actors in New York at the Dramatists Guild, and they do a formal staged reading with the talkback. That's how plays get launched. We're incredibly lucky that we had several playwrights in the program, and we're only an hour and a half out of Manhattan. That was a gift. And we know not all programs can do that. But the point is there practical day-to-day business, the writer's life, is some of that included in the program so that you don't feel that the business piece is scary, or you at least know how to contact an agent, how to talk to an agent, how to write to one. what that dialogue should look like when you actually get to speak with one. Those were skill sets that most of us never had as graduate students in writing at other schools, because it was forbidden to talk about business. It was forbidden to talk about how do I actually make this thing go to publication. But without that, you're kind of hamstrung as a writer. You know, you're floundering trying to figure out, well, then how do I make that happen? So whether it's our program or another program, what kind of practical abilities, for ours, again, we try to make them practical. Think of it this way. Is this something you put on your resume? And so not only do I have a degree, but did I edit the student magazine? Did I assist in research, if you're in a residency program, possibly with the faculty member? Did I do annotations? Do I have some kind of academic skill? Or in a low res or residency program, did I work with an agent as an intern, for 15 weeks? So those are the kinds of opportunities I would hope that you would find in all MFA programs, because that's what will help you afterwards. The craft, we all have to teach craft, and we all should teach craft. But it's that practical piece that more and more programs are starting to add. And again, as a reviewer, that was the constant drumbeat I heard from every group of students in every program. We don't have enough of that. And we feel like we get out of here, we know how to write a book, but we don't know what to do with it. So look for something that offers you those outlets.
One of the things I think that characterizes the program that you built and started in 2004, 2005, when
Started developing in 2003, and we didn't launch to 2005 because we did include those industry professionals who held us back a bit, but it was good because we were all academics and they made us think in non-academic ways, which is how business people think. We as writers, we could talk all day on the beautiful aesthetics of language, but that's not what's going to market your book. And so they kind of slowed us down, and we embedded those in the program.
well, from my own experience as a faculty member from that time, 16 years, and I might add, congratulations on your upcoming retirement, Bonnie. Well deserved. Wonderful founding and developing this unique program. And one of the aspects that strikes me as unique is the fact that not only are there a lot of
Countdown, by the way.
what is that?
It's my
Oh,
retirement.
that's a countdown. Okay.
4 months, 13 days, 12
Very good.
hours, 4 minutes, 25, 24, 23 seconds.
23 seconds. Well, here, this unfortunately, this little interlude will be a half an hour that you'll never get back. But one of the things that I have appreciated most is not just the presence of the industry professionals, which is great, but also the fact that the faculty is so wide-ranging in their interests. I mean, there are young adult, there are commercial adventure, writers or detective type writers. There's screenwriters. There's people from such a varied kind of background that oftentimes doesn't get included in university curricula. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was after long conversations from those over those 2 years, and that I think, and that definitely is part of what happened with bringing in the agents and editors. They suggested to us that, look, not everybody wants to write a literary fiction novel, and not everybody's capable of that. But that's what most MFA programs require, and we can't sell those always. They have to be a great combination of commercialism, meaning there's a plot and character, along with beautiful language and the way that the piece might be structured in a really creative way. But we can sell a romance series if it's really good. And in fact, one of our alums, Jennifer Bokel, is under contract for 5 books I call them kind of hard porn books because
Mhm.
they're not Harlequin. It's an imprint, I think, part of Harlequin, but it's a romance series that takes place back in medieval times. And so it's partly historical, it's partly bodice ripper kind of stuff, but the female characters are in control, and you're hearing it from their perspective. I mean, it's a kind of formula. We used to make fun of it as formulaic because there's certain things that have to be in the book that the readers expect. It's like a Patterson mystery or a Grisham book. There's certain things those readers come to expect. But it's not easy to sit down and write those. It's not paint by number, even though it feels like it. You have to really like that. So an early decision that Mike and I made, my co-founder, Mike Lennon, was you're only going to write well what you really want to write. So if you come in and you want to do a mystery thriller as a film, then we needed to have faculty members who would go there with you and know that genre. And so that's what we've added over the years, are faculty willing to read that material, willing to understand how those models are put together, because they're all different, and then go there with you and help you make that happen. Um, and that's been the beauty of the Wilkes program. But I would add that that's one of the beauties of many low-res programs. Spalding, Antioch, two of the folks that I knew best, Steve Heller, Kathleen Driscoll, when we talk, that's what they both try to offer their students as well. And the advantage a low-res program has is they can have more genres represented, because the faculty in these programs are mostly adjuncts or writing mentors who may be working somewhere else. And in the case of our program, may be teaching somewhere else, but all 100% of them are writing full time. They're all writers. And a residency program, these are bricks and mortar faculty. You can only afford 4 or 5 of them to really be part of the program. So you're limited by what those 4 or 5 offer. And usually they're going to offer poetry and literary fiction, nonfiction in most cases now. But the genres may be more limited because you have less people. We have 20 people to choose from.
Mhm.
And if you look at the bios of the faculty, and I would say the same thing for most low res, you're going to have more faculty available. You're going to have broader genres because they understand that these people didn't go to a residency program because the students wanted to do children's literature, or they wanted to try we do a lot of YA. We do a lot of dystopian. We do, I can't even, I think there's every kind of play you could possibly do, including musicals, we've done. We've just had to find someone for them to work with. But again, finding the right faculty who are eager to learn that. Kaylee Jones had never done YA, and she worked with a student who did a YA sci-fi trilogy.
Mhm.
But her daughter Erina was 12 at the time and reading that literature. So Kaylee decided, I know how to write a novel. I can learn this. But she read 30 novels to prepare to help work with that student, and read with her to learn that form. And that's what you have to have faculty willing to do. That there's not one way to write a book. There's not one way to do a chapbook. And I'm not trying to put down residency programs, but that tends to happen more often in a residency program. But it's more because you have limited voices teaching, and that's not a knock on them. They're all wonderful. The folks who are teaching residency are usually stars, but it allows us a broader range of genres. And we've had one graphic novel. That was a more difficult challenge. And in fact, Marlon James worked with that student. It was the one time he taught for us, before Marlon went on to win all that other stuff and stop, he gets to do what Marlon wants to do now, which is wonderful, for Marlon. But Yeah, Guaqueri Gomez from Mexico was a graphic design artist, and he wanted to do a graphic novel, and Marlon agreed to work with him. So again, that shows the range of what you can do.
And in fact, you mentioned Marlon James, but certainly, the breadth of the program is unique and incredible. But at the same time, there's been a lot of literary novels, poetry published. Obviously, most prominently, the Marlon James is an alumnus and
Mhm.
has won the National Book Critics Circle Award and
That Man
the
Booker thing.
Man Booker Award. So he's pretty much been as successful as it's possibly to be as a writer, and he started at the Wilkes program, along with a lot of other, I think, highly literary writers who've
Yeah.
published
Oh, yep.
with Simon and Schuster and Akashic and Kaylee Jones books. I mean, we think of Laurie Lowenstein and Barb Taylor. These are all, people who have written literary novels and been very
They're
successful.
historical. They're crossover. They're literary, but Laurie's is actually is listed as mystery, historical, literary.
Hmm.
She crossed all three, and that's not uncommon. Maroa Ujide is another
Right.
one, really high literary um, kind of writer who has this wonderful book, Time of the Locust, that's almost all interior monologue, but there's a reason. The characters are isolated from each other in their minds and geographically. So these long interior monologues that you'd say, no, you can't do that in a novel, actually absolutely work and
Mhm.
beautifully, beautifully work. So yeah, I would consider that one. Taylor Politis.
Right.
It's historical, but it's also highly literary. With The Rebel's Wife, that's a Random House book as well. Yeah, we've had several, but you're right. They have a wide range of um, possibilities.
Another feature I think that fits in, I think people can begin to see a theme here in terms of the acceptance of a variety of kinds of genres, but with the common goal of bridging between the academic experience and the professional experience. And certainly one of the features of the program has been something that I've been just following up now with all of these interviews. I've interviewed
Yeah.
Johnny Temple, Ibrahim Ahmad, from Akashic Books, Kaylee Jones from Kaylee Jones Books, David Poyer and Lenore Hart from Northampton Press, uh, and Albert Lafarge, who is an agent who comes with us, who comes to the program on a regular basis. Bill Snyder, the managing editor of Etruscan Press, which is housed at Wilkes,
Mhm.
and all. So that these various programs are actuated and fostered by the program, and maybe talk a little bit about how those programs enrich the experience of the student.
Sure. Excuse me. I think it goes back. I mean, the basic thing and the most important thing is it goes back to what I was saying earlier about practicality. There are programs who bring in agents and editors maybe for a weekend panel, and you get fleetingly to see them. We've made them partners. So those internships that I mentioned earlier, we also have Blue Moon Books, which is a playwriting company founded by Gene Klein, one of our playwriting faculty members. Um, but it makes those folks, since they're on campus and they're there and they're available for students to talk to, ask questions, not just in one panel, but they're actually part of the curriculum for several events, including the final readings. That makes the business piece real. It's not just something we add on. It's a part of the curriculum. So that's the first thing. Um, Also, because they're there talking to us, I use them. Johnny Temple, Christine Tomasino, who's a longtime agent, are on our board of trustees, or our advisory board, I should say, for the Wilkes program. And so I do talk to them when we have curriculum changes ahead of us, reach out to them and seek their advice. They aren't shy at all about, by Saturday before they leave, telling me what they think about the cohort and how they did. We end Saturday with a pitch panel with all the agents, editors, and publishers, with the students who are going into their last term, getting ready to send it to them to polish their manuscripts. They have to stand and deliver a pitch. and they have to do, basically synopsis with the who, what, when, where, and why of their chapbook, their screenplay, their play, their memoir, their biography, whatever they're working on, novel. Um, and they get a response from the agents and editors on the spot. That's an example of a business module that we include that's partly for the students to understand what they're writing, which is hard for writers to do when you get deep into a draft, and especially when you're trying to polish it and get the shape of it formed and finish the manuscript. And so it's partly that exercise, but it also is an exercise to have a conversation with 7 professionals. So it's one student standing in front of 7 professionals talking about their manuscript. And that's a hard exercise. In fact, some of our faculty have said, I don't know if I could do that.
Right.
But in the end, that's what agents and editors want to be able to do with you, and producers and directors. They need to be able to have a conversation with you without feeling that everything they say you're going to write it down and do it, or worst case, you're going to defend everything and what you meant to do was this, but if it isn't on the page and if it isn't in your comment, you didn't do it. So what you meant isn't necessarily what they're seeing on the page. So it's a multiple exercise, but that's it. I think I'm answering your question. That's why it's really critical why those partners are there. They're not just add-ons, they're actually part of the classes.
And again, I think we can see the theme coming through here is that there is this partnership, and another aspect of that the construction of that program is the fact that I know that when you first started, one of the advisory board members was Norman Mailer,
Right.
and my recollection, what I've heard from you, is that it was he who insisted that writing be the only criterion for acceptance as opposed to academic credentials. And so students can come to the program who either have not had a very stellar undergraduate career or perhaps don't have a BA at all. And certainly some of the best writers I've seen in the program fall into that category. I think, Jason Carney, for instance, whose book, Starving the Vulture, is a tremendous memoir. So tell us about that conversation and how the Mailers got involved, all the way from Norman now to Susan Mailer and Michael Mailer, John Buffalo Mailer. It's a real
It's a Mailer connection.
It's a Mailer connection.
Yeah, Mike Lennon, my co-founder, was and is Norman's official biographer, and did finally release his book. I think it was 2014. I think finally the biography came out, and it's called Norman Mailer: A Double Life, and it's a wonderfully written biography, even though it was written by Mike, who I'm very partial to. But he takes 4 threads, he calls it, and you follow those threads from the beginning of Norman's life to the end. It's just a well done, beautifully written narrative. And so you feel as if you're reading a narrative rather than an academic poem, even though it has, it does include, commentary on each of the novels and all of that. But to back up then, so when we thought about this program, we thought, wouldn't it be great to get some advisory board members so we could put their names on the masthead? And we were thinking more like, wouldn't it be great to have Norman say, this program's great, you should come to Wilkes University. So Mike and I met with him, and instead of that happening, Norman says, I don't even know why you need a program. You should write. And if this program is going to be like other programs I've gone and visited, and it's all about talking about writing, but they're not writing a lot, or they're writing short pieces and they're not writing a full manuscript, or if it doesn't include the business piece and what it's like to be a writer, then I don't want to be part of the program. And so that sent Mike and I scurrying back, and we realized because of that conversation, that's why we took 2 years to develop it, is we invited writers from each of the categories that we wanted to offer, the 5 categories of poetry, nonfiction, fiction, screenwriting, and playwriting. But he said, also invite the agents and editors, and he gave us some names. So Jack Scoville, who was the first agent who was part of the program, Carol Schneider, who was from Random House, was an editor from New York, and then Veronica Winholtz replaced her. They were all part of the development of the program over those 2 years. So that changed the curriculum immediately to be, what do you need to do so that at the end you have a manuscript that is not only well written, but possibly marketable, and where would that go, and what would that journey look like, and what do I need to get there? That's how they helped us. Norman also said, since I don't know why you need a program, if you're a serious writer, you should be writing. But do you need a degree? And he said the only thing he learned from got out of Harvard was a lot about engineering, which he was fascinating with. And by the way, that was his major. It wasn't writing. But he got to hang out with a lot of smart people and talk about literature. That's what college gave him. It wasn't the degree who made him a writer. And so Mike and I went to the state ed department and asked if it was possible to have a waiver if you had someone who already had significant publication or significant ability, tremendous talent in an area. And it's usually, in our case, someone in their 30s, 40s, or 50s who's had those experiences, but for whatever reason never finished a bachelor's degree. Life intervened. And in fact, we found that some of our most gifted writers didn't do so well as an undergrad because they were off writing and doing what Norman was doing. They were hanging out with creative people, and you could see the classes they liked and didn't like in their transcripts. And again, since the median age of our students is like 40 to 45, that's median, so they range from 20s to 70s, literally. Old transcripts are not really helpful. The writing sample is what is really helpful, and that's what 90% of our decisions based on. So at first, the state ed department fought us, but eventually agreed, and it was Norman who pushed that. So what it brought us is a group of people. You mentioned Jason Carney, Laura Moran, Bertrude Boyd, I'm sure I'm thinking of some others. These mostly were slam poets who felt they weren't welcome in the academic world because their poetry was oral mostly, and they didn't feel that the academic world welcomed that kind of poetry. And I think it was probably true for a long time. But because we had, and most of them didn't have a degree. And I don't know what that's all about. I know individually why that is, but anyway, they found us because of that. And yeah, you're right. Laura Moran is also just did a chapbook that knocked everybody out. I mean, it was a tour de force of voice and form, because she was playing with form. And Jason, as you said, came and did a memoir, because he had a lot of chapbooks already, and he wanted to push himself into another area. So they came and they stretched, and they did a wonderful job.
And as have you, Bonnie, in bringing this unique program to its full height and breadth, and to a national reputation, which is obviously part of your work also at the AWP. And we will miss you, Bonnie, but you're still gonna be with us as an advisor and as an inspiration. Thank you, Dr. Bonnie Culver.
Thank you, Dr. Philip Brady.
All right.